Today, we're going to continue the process of reviewing the disadvantaged communities criteria that was finalized on March 27th, 2023. To aid us in this process, the technical team has compiled this presentation to assist with our efforts to outline the work that we're going to be taking on over the next couple of months. As always, the goal is to keep this meeting to the agreed upon time to benefit everybody's schedule. Next slide, please. So just to go over go back to meeting procedures. Thanks, Tiffany. Just to go over meeting procedures for anyone who's observing this meeting either live or via WebEx. This is a meeting of the Climate Justice Working Group. This is not a public hearing or a forum. We will not be taking testimony or questions from the public during this meeting. Only Climate Justice Working Group members are permitted to discuss, deliberate, and vote on any issues that come up during this meeting. If you are in attendance, we ask that you remain respectful of these proceedings and refrain from raising your hands, attempting to draw attention to yourself, or interjecting at any point. At the close of proceedings, if you are in a publicly accessible location, we ask that you exit the area. Additionally, for folks who are on the line as working group members, just so we know, to reduce noise, we're going to keep the rooms muted. For Climate Justice Working Group members who are participating virtually, please mute your lines to reduce background noise. Raise your hand and we'll unmute your room. And since this meeting is broadcast via WebEx, we ask that you state your name before speaking for the record. All right, next slide. So we're going to go over the agenda. We're going to start with a roll call to determine whether or not we have quorum. If we do have quorum, we'll proceed with approving the minutes from our previous meeting on June 17th. We'll have a recap of the last meeting. We'll update public input, discuss the landfill indicator update, go over the DAC review, and have next steps. If we don't have quorum, obviously we will not approve the minutes and we will not be able to deliberate on anything that we discussed today, but the technical team will still be able to present. We just won't be able to engage in any discussion. So I guess let's start to see if we have a quorum. So I can start here. Alana Cadell-Tuckey, present here in the Albany conference room.
And hello, everybody. Michael Duramio with NYSERDA, also present in Albany.
Okay. Elizabeth, you're saying Eddie is having trouble logging on. If he could email Tiffany, she can help him on the back end.
Okay.
Thank you. I see Green Bank, Elizabeth.
Elizabeth First, Department of Labor.
Hi. Is there anyone else in the Green Bank with you?
All by myself.
Okay. And I see Jill in the Raybrook office. Oh, you're still, can we unmute Jill's room?
Can you hear me now?
Yep, I can hear you.
Hi.
Hi. Okay, is there anyone in the Buffalo Region 9 building?
Hey Alana, this is Rawa. I'm actually online. That's what was I was sent that. So I thought we were not in person today.
Oh, no, we needed to be in person.
All right, so I can drive over there. It'll take me about 15 minutes.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll have Rawa, once she gets into the Buffalo office, she'll be in person. Is there anyone we know that Abby is unfortunately unable to make it into Avon. It does not appear as if we're going to have quorum right now, and I don't know if we're going to make quorum today. So for now, we're going to have to refrain from voting on the minutes or having any deliberations. So what we can do is we can absolutely move forward with the presentation from the technical team, and folks can ask questions, but we won't be able to sort of discuss any of these things amongst one another. So if folks could refrain until we get quorum from discussing any topics that we have amongst each other, we can remain in compliance with open meetings law. We have Amy Klein here, so there are now 3 of us here in the Albany office. Oh, no problems. So there are 3 of us here, 2 there, and then Rawa will be in the Region 9 office, so we just need one more person to show up. We'll have quorum. But for now, we can just move forward, and once we have quorum, we'll continue on with voting, and then we can move forward with any deliberations we might have. So if we could skip.
Alana?
Yes.
This is Lisa. This is Lisa from DEC. I think once Rawa gets to Buffalo, we should have 7 to count toward quorum, I believe.
Oh, yes, because Elizabeth.
Yes.
Yes, so we will have 7 once Rawa is in Buffalo, so we'll.
So I think we can move forward with the presentation, but until Rawa attends from the Buffalo office, we won't unfortunately be able to have the Climate Justice Working Group members deliberate. However, we can present the information to you. Then once she attends, then and any folk, Abby and Eddie, you're also able to deliberate. I think maybe we can just take another roll call once Rawa and Eddie get on.
Okay. Great. I know that Eddie was having some problems getting on.
Yes. Yeah, so once every member is online or at the location, maybe we could do another roll call and then do minutes, and we could just start the presentations before then.
Okay. And worst case scenario for Eddie, if he's having a difficult time logging on using the link, he can go on to the link at the Climate Justice Working Group website and just use that link. And once we know that he's on, we can elevate him to a panelist. All right, well, let's move forward. We're going to skip over the approval of minutes, and we're just going to jump into the annual review for now. So we're going to begin the process of reviewing the disadvantaged communities criteria in accordance with the Climate Act. Next slide. So what we're going to be discussing moving forward, next slide. There we go. So moving forward, we're going to discuss the feedback from the public input that we received. We're going to get some updates on the landfill methodology, a suggestion that was from the prior public input and this round of public input. A little bit later, we're going to discuss the urban-rural dichotomy and the disadvantaged communities criteria. Hopefully, once Rawa gets into Region 9, we'll be able to deliberate on some additional suggested indicators. And then we'll, hopefully, if there's time, we'll be able to discuss the accessibility of the maps. But moving forward now, I'm going to turn things over to Oliver, who's going to give us a quick synopsis of the feedback that we received during the public input period. Oliver.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're well. So we had a public feedback period that was opened on July 10 and ran till August 20 to solicit public input from on the DAC criteria. We've begun to analyze that feedback and we'll be making it available to the Climate Justice Working Group for review, and we'll be including it in the final documentation of for this annual review. Next slide, please. We received 32 unique responses, 22 of which came from unique entities. The responses discussed a variety of subjects, which are listed on this slide. I'll pause so that people can read through it real quick before we move forward. Next slide, please. The major themes include concerns that the DAC criteria fails to capture lived experiences in rural communities, and that the DAC maps are difficult to use and understand, and that the methodology used to develop the DAC criteria lacks transparency, and that there are many burdens experienced by communities that are not captured or inaccurately captured by the DAC criteria. Next slide, please. Many comments included suggestions regarding DAC indicators. While these suggestions are all valuable insight, many exist outside of the technical team's capacity to integrate as DAC indicators at this time. To prepare a DAC indicator for consideration by the Climate Justice Working Group, the technical team requires a high-quality data source of statewide data and sufficient time to integrate that data into a draft model for the DAC criteria. Several suggested indicators could be developed for consideration by the Climate Justice Working Group in the future for future iterations. These include access to community and economic resources, access to public transportation, population changes, impaired water sources, and gentrification. Next slide, please. Methodological suggestions highlighted the differences of burdens and conditions experienced between urban and rural communities. Additionally, many commenters suggested considering not just census tracts identified as DACs, but also census tracts in proximity to those census tracts. Finally, many commenters suggested that census tracts as a geographic unit often fails to describe the lived experiences of a community and encouraged exploring alternative geographic units to base the maps on. Next slide, please. We'll be providing an opportunity for the Climate Justice Working Group to ask any questions about the public feedback. Please send me any questions or comments by September 24th, and we can discuss any questions you may have now here. Hearing none and seeing no hands. Is there anything in the chat? All right, let's move forward.
I do have a question.
Oh yeah,
Sorry.
of course, please. Yeah.
It's Jill Hank. I'm just to reiterate, we're going to be able to see all of the comments by the November meeting? Is that what
Yes,
Alana said?
yes. We'll have all that
Okay.
prepared for you for
Okay.
your review by then. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And Abby has her hand up.
Yeah, this is Abby. I was just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on what the details of what people were saying about lived experience in rural areas.
Primarily, the comments were concerned about lived experiences in the Adirondacks, how something about the DAC criteria is just not capturing what people feel are disadvantaged communities in the Adirondacks. So that was like the main thing, was that people just feel like we're missing something there, and we're looking into it. You know, there's a lot to be said about remoteness and connectivity to economic and educational resources that we're just not really exploring right now with the DAC criteria. I do think that there's opportunities to improve the data to hopefully capture those lived experiences better with the criteria. But that's going to take time and deliberation by this group.
Okay, thank you.
I'm curious. Yeah, I'm curious to see the comments. We have a unique, well, maybe not that unique, but we have a scenario in the Adirondacks where we have a lot of second homeowners, and often that skews our income data for census tracts. And I know that's a big concern of people up here. So yeah, looking forward to more details. Thanks, Oliver.
Cool. I'm going to pause for another moment so that if any working group members have any further questions, they can ask them. And if not, please feel free to contact me and I'll be happy to discuss anything you like. All right, let's sally forward. Next slide, please. So next we're going to be discussing the landfill indicators. In June, we discussed a potential methodological change for how landfills are mapped for the DAC indicators, and DEC has reworked the mapping to better capture the proximate area of landfills on their communities. Next slide, please. So previously, landfills were mapped as a single point. I was derisively referring to them as a mailbox. This point obviously cannot capture the impact of a landfill on its landscape and the surrounding communities. And the 500-meter proximate area was calculated around that single point. Next slide, please. The new model So we went in and used satellite imagery and tax parcel data to map all the landfills in the state. I think it's a little more than 50 landfills. This resulted in a map of polygons rather than points, which more comprehensively describe the actual footprint of landfills. And then we recalculated the 500-meter proximate area around that. We then calculated the percentage area of each 2020 census tract that occurs within 500 meters of that landfill, and have passed that data to Illume for integration into the DAC update. Next slide, please. Again, I'm happy to receive any questions or talk on the phone with any working group members. If they have any questions down the road, please send all those to me by September 24th. And I'm happy to field questions here now if you have anything front of mind.
It's Jill.
Hi, Jill.
Is there a place? Hi. Is there a place we could see a map of all of the landfills?
Yeah, I can make that available to you for sure.
Okay. Yeah. I'd like to take a look at that. Thank you.
Yeah, give me a couple of weeks and I'll work that up and make it available to the entire working group.
Appreciate it.
Yep. Okay.
Else have any questions before we move forward? All right. Well, seeing none, I guess we'll move forward to the recap of the DAC criteria and the annual review process. So we'll throw things over to Alex.
I would like to share my whole screen because we're gonna, go crazy with so many documents today. So, do I need a ball? Has that changed? Has that improved?
Sorry.
Looks like I can share it.
Yep, you should have it now.
Okay, cool. Alana, can I ask, since I can't always see everyone and I certainly can't see the chat, that you holler if there's anything I'm missing?
I will do.
Okay, so I'm glad you all are here. And last meeting, some of you were here and we did a kind of a recap of the criteria in the annual review process. And we're going to do that again today because not everyone was there last time, and I want to make sure that we're there, like we're all on the same page, but I'm just going to go through it a lot faster. So interrupt me with questions anytime. Just ask away. So first of all, there's been a lot that we've been doing in the background for the data refresh this year. We decided to move to 2020 census tract boundaries, and that's really because it was just really time. And what that means is that, some things have shifted and some things haven't. I also want to kind of go through the scenarios that we have for you, and those are kind of just the updated data refresh that we have. Then we've got diabetes added to it, and then we have one with airport proximity. So lots to show you there. And then, really we want to get through kind of the what to research in the future, what we're thinking about in the future, and then plan for the priorities that you all have, so that we can get to the vote. And skip through a couple slides. Please stop me if something doesn't make sense or bring me back. Again, we've got these different factors and larger categories, and then there's different indicators inside of these different factors. So the V1, which is the version 1 that we all voted for, that you all voted for last year, I'm going to call V1, it had 45 indicators. Environmental indicators are these: traffic density, bus traffic, particulate matter, benzene, water discharge, remediation sites, management sites, major oil storage facilities, power generation, active landfills, now with the updated data, Municipal waste combustors, scrap metal, industrial manufacturing, housing vacancy rate, and then the potential climate change risks, heat projections, flooding for coastal, flooding for inland, low vegetative cover, agricultural land use, driving time to hospitals or urgent care. And this factor, this potential climate change risk, is doubled in the calculation. I'll show that in a minute. You also have population characteristics and vulnerabilities. We've got income, less than 80% area median income, less than 100% federal poverty line, bachelor's degree, unemployment rate, single parent households, Latinos, Black, percent Asian, percent Native American, limited English proficiency, and historical redlining. Then we've got asthma, COPD, heart attack, premature death, low birth weight, percent without health insurance, percent with disabilities, and percent above age 65. For housing and energy, excuse me, we've got percent renter, housing cost burden, energy poverty or cost burden, manufactured homes, homes built before 1960, and percent without internet. So we got lots of things. And I will again note that the percent Latino and percent Black are double weighted within this factor. And then the two income components are also double weighted inside of this factor. Okay, talking fast. Anyone questions? Here's where we get to all the mathy things. And this basically says, you know, we take the average of everything. We've created this percentile rank for all the indicators. So everything's on the same index, and that's really important. So it's kind of normalized. And then we do the weighted averages of the indicators within factors, and then factors within those larger components. And then we add up the components. And this is how we are adding them up. So you take the averages across everything, and then double weight the potential climate risk change because there's 3 factors here and 4 over here. Adding everything up, and we get a final score. You take those scores, and then we actually create 2 different ranks. We have a statewide rank, and then we have kind of a New York City and then rest of state rank. And we take the top scores of each of these. That gives us a chance to make sure that there is some rural exposure because those scores are just different. And we'll talk about that in a little bit too. Then we all decided that we take 35% of the top tracks. And then from that, we added the 19 indigenous tribal areas and then 138 tracks that only were scored based on the environmental factor because it had too small of a population. And that means 53 of those total are designated tax. Then in addition to that, we have the disadvantaged individual criteria for disadvantaged purposes for investing or directing clean energy programs or investments, but not for anything else. That individual criteria was all decided to, like you all agreed to the below 60% state median income. There were different options. This is the one that aligns with publicly administered programs. Okay, that was the world's fastest recap. Any questions? Nope, good, cool. Wait, I heard something.
Oh, no, that was me. I was saying I don't see any.
Okay, cool. So now I want to talk about the fact that we made a big shift from the 2010 census tracts, which, you know, it's been a minute since 2010, so we needed to move to 2020, and that means that, you know, the tracts, there's just more tracts. This has nothing to do with DAX. This is just a rundown of how many census tracts there are now in the 2020 tracts versus the 2010 ones. And you see that there's a 10% increase. And they're kind of by region, different a little bit. The capital region grew the most along with Finger Lakes. Oh, sorry, North Country got divided a bit more and had extra. So for the most part, this also means that we're going to see a 10% increase in the DAX, that kind of the number that we see. But I wanted to go through a couple little things here. Census tracts, for the most part, are the same. There are a few changes, but for the most part, what you see in 2010 stuck in 2020. There are a couple times when some census tracts on the left here got divided into two different census tracts. So in this case, you've got the kind of, it just divided along, so we can kind of think of those now as two tracts rather than one. There are some times, very few times, when there were originally two tracts, and now then it basically got subsumed into one tract. There are also even rarer cases where this kind of 2010 tract right here, where there was actually, say, two tracts, got divided into three tracts. So that means the boundaries changed in a way that is not just kind of a one cut through. And those get tricky for us to kind of work with. Now, for the most part, we have updated data, and it was pretty easy for us to just update the tracks and then kind of keep rolling. But there were a few times where we needed to kind of crosswalk the data. And so we needed to understand all the different permutations here. Like if we were taking old data and we had this right here, and looking at the middle one where it got combined, one part of it was a DAC, the other part was not. When it's combined and you look at all of it together, it's no longer a DAC. And then the bottom one at the very lowest, again, these are very rare. You know, a DAC was happening at the top track, but not the bottom one. Now that there's three, you see a DAC on one side, not a DAC in the middle, and then a DAC at the top. Any questions about this?
You unmuted?
Yes, we are.
Oh, can I just point out, just with regards to the changing from the 2010 to the 2020, that obviously this is something that, you know, it's not necessarily a done deal. It's something that we would need to vote on as the Climate Justice Working Group. I just wanted to make sure that we're pointing that out. This is one of the suggestions that we're making as a proposed change.
And in my opinion, something we really need to do. So hopefully when you all have deliberative abilities, you can tell me that that's okay and that we can move on from this. We're not going to be able to refresh data, particularly demographic data, without doing this in the future.
And before you move on, Alex, I just wanted to do a quick roll call because now that Rawa is in location, one, she has her hand up, and two, I just need to do roll call because Eddie is also here. So just recognize Eddie and Rawa.
Hey, all, apologies for the trouble getting on. Appreciate the help getting on, though. Thank you.
Everybody, Rawa's here and present.
And did you have a question, Rawa? Oh, you're still muted.
Yes. My question to Dr. Dunn is those DACs that have those changes in them now because of the census changing between the different years, will we get a list of where those communities are?
Yeah, and when I show you the scenarios, we can kind of run into and get really close into those and look through them, but I can work up with our team kind of a list of where those shifted. Yeah, especially at the bottom, they are exceptions, but I think I will also say that once we realized how important it was to move to the 2020 tracks, we decided to do a full data refresh on everything we could possibly do. And so that's what I'll be showing you today is that locked in there, and then you'll be able to see the differences. So just like I wanted to call out before, you know, the total tracks without the DAC kind of thing increased by 10%. There's 10% more tracks now. And just like that, we have a 10% increase in the number of tracks that are DACs. It aligns with our 35% the whole time. So I really like it when the math all works. Okay. because I would like to actually be able to not look at 2010 tracks ever again, can I get and I know that this is not an official vote, but if we have quorum right now, I'd like to get anyone's thoughts or concerns about moving to the 2020 census boundaries.
Hank here. I don't know how to raise my hand, sorry. Heck yes, I think we should move to the 2020 census information data. So thank you.
Okay. And silence is not consent here, so I need to hear all of you say you're cool with this so that we can move on and not be, there. I see Elizabeth +++, so I'm assuming that's a good thing.
Yeah, I support moving on.
This is Abby. I'm also all for it.
Cool. I see Eddie's +++. Agency folk, you are voting members as well.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to take all of those and say we have now decided to move to 2020 tracks, which I'm really excited about because I don't want to go back.
Somebody's waving.
Yep,
Oh,
The Green Bank. I
Green
think
Bank is waving.
They're trying to figure out how to unmute, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Oh, sorry,
Yep,
we're
there
having
we are.
some tech issues here. Elizabeth Fair, well, I'm okay with moving to the 2020 census track.
awesome. Thank you. Okie dokes. So now I want to talk about the fact that yes, we moved to those. Those are all the things. We had to update like all the data. So those 45 indicators, and some of them are we're still waiting, and those are 6 of them. So we got 39 all set and good. But the last 6, we're doing something so that we can look at data now and not have to wait. So there's 6 DOH indicators that we're waiting for, and we're expecting to get 5 this month. So asthma, heart attack, COPD, premature deaths, and diabetes. We're still waiting on low birth weight. At the very least, we can use the crosswalk, which I'll describe in a minute, if we need to get that. This crosswalk is basically taking an average based on the population, a weighted average of the area that was a DAC before, or for a census tract that was in 2010, and kind of making the computation so that the data flow over into the new track in 2020. I can give you a much more technical rundown of that if you want, but I figure you don't. But we can give you the details of that in writing. It's the way that we will be able to kind of work through a couple of these things that we can't update because the data are not available. And that is this main one right here, benzene, the air concentration. We obtained refresh data, so it's all new data, but it was still on 2010 tracks. So we had to basically use that crosswalk to get the refresh data into 2020 tracks. The projected 90 days of Fahrenheit, we have in 2020 tracks, but because it's a 50-year projection, we're not going to update those data. We're just leaving them, but we have them on 2020 tracks. So it's like the one indicator we're not updating, refreshing data. And then for the DOH work, for those DOH data points that we have updated refresh data for diabetes, but we don't for the others. And that means that we're using placeholders, basically the old data mapped onto the new census tracks until we get the final data. One of the critical things is I think we need to make sure we get most of those data points before you really finally vote on things, or we all look at the crosswalk, make sure it's okay. Okay, now other changes that we made to the data. We wanted to get area median income data that was more refreshed and recent because the other one was from a long time ago, like 2015. So Department of Energy lead tool is now what we've shifted to so that we have updated data. And then for landfills, as Oliver kind of outlined, we've updated the methodology for that as well. And that's it. A lot of data updates, a lot of data refresh there. But it does mean now that we can look at things. And so based on comments from this group and from the New York City report, there's three different areas that we wanted to kind of look into and discuss and review with you. First is diabetes. We finally have those data. So I want to show you kind of a scenario that doesn't have those data, that's basically the same as last year's on 2020 tracks, and then a scenario with just diabetes added. And that would go into the health factor, by the way. Then I want to show you one where basically we take that, and I want from that first scenario for you all to deliberate and tell me whether you're cool with adding diabetes in. From there, we'll move into, okay, that's our main scenario. Do we want to look at adding proximity to airports? And then finally, I want to discuss pesticide use because that's a toughie. Any questions or thoughts or concerns before I move on? Okie dokie. So, yeah.
I did have a question. Can you go back to the slide?
Mm-hmm.
So pesticide use, does that include places that have a lot of golf, that people play golf? And noise pollution, does that include people who moved to the proximity to the airports?
Well, for the first one, for pesticide use, the data that we have, the data source that is there is, in my opinion, not good enough. It's self-reported data. So I want us to not use it, but I want to show you all what we have and kind of what we want to track down. It doesn't have everything that I would want for pesticide use, but those data are very hard to get.
Okay, I was just curious. Thanks.
Yeah, and then for proximity to airports, noise pollution, I want to show you what it is, kind of give you a rundown for it. And then, frankly, what I think the most useful part of that noise pollution one is, when we started looking at it, is that the noise pollution data mirror our traffic, our diesel traffic and other indicators, and really it's not useful for that, but it is useful for modeling proximity to airports. And so I want us to use it that way.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we've got diabetes, and I'm so excited we have diabetes data. So we've got really solid diabetes data. It is most correlated. I think this is not a surprise with asthma, low birth weight, percent Black population, premature deaths, 80% AMI, and single parent households. It means then we wanted to put this into the health factor. So it will be part of the factor that has asthma, COPD, households with disabilities, premature death rate, heart attack, health insurance, populations over 65, and low birth weight. This crazy histogram, one of the things I wanted to note here is that if you look at this, the further out you have here is kind of like the prevalence, the percent kind of in a census tract, the percentile. The higher the percentile, the more prevalence of diabetes in that census tract. And we've divided this out from rest of state. That's the kind of greenish blue, and then the pink over here. And you'll see, there's less prevalence of diabetes in rest of state as opposed to New York City. And the other part here that I think is really interesting, if you can kind of like squint in here, is that the New York City data are bimodal. What that means and what that tells me is that there's two like little subpopulations happening here that's indicating things. And what the diabetes data will do for us is capture some of that second, that larger part here that I'm circling. So this is a good addition to our indicator list set of criteria, and I'm looking forward to showing it to you in a minute. Questions, thoughts?
This is Abby. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just gonna quick say for Climate Justice Working Group members, when we kind of start deliberations, if you're talking, if you raise your hand, if you guys could just be on camera, you only have to do it while you're talking, but we just need folks to be on camera. Thanks. Abby, go for it.
Ooh, I don't know if you want to see me on camera today, Alana.
I think we're gonna let you pass on that today.
I have COVID, y'all.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering about, and I'm sorry if you said this and I just missed it, but the y-axis here on the histogram, what is it?
It's the count. Histograms are always counts on the top. So there's like the higher that bar, the more census tracts there are in that little
Census tract.
bar.
Okay. All right. The count of census tracts.
Yeah.
Okay.
So to me, I find it really, really interesting that we have kind of this large group right here of 200 plus census tracts. That's pretty high prevalence of diabetes in those census tracts. So to me, that's the capture. We're capturing that, and that's going to be, I think, good in our criteria to help explain and add a little bit more.
So could I restate that and you tell me if I got it right or not?
Yeah, totally.
So in some census tracts, it's very, very high. And in others, it's not. Is it that simple?
I would say in most census tracts, it's not high. That's why those big bars are on the left side of the graph. And in a few census tracts, or, you know, a solid few, those further down to the right of there's still a good solid amount, right? There's 200 plus in some areas here for New York City that have a pretty high prevalence of diabetes.
Okay. All right.
So you got it right, Abby. It's not always easy to see these.
Sorry, can I ask a follow-up question? So what does this mean for us?
That is a good question. So what this means is if you all want to, and again, I'll show you the maps after I go through kind of the airport one description of it, is you can choose to add this into the DAC criteria, and where it would go would be in the health factor. And really at this point, we have a lot of indicators. So I have a whole warning slide about not adding too many, but this gives us a little bit more kind of what I would call is like explanatory variable. Like it would give you a little bit more information into disadvantagedness for certain tracks. And so that's what this would do.
And it does correlate with other factors, but it doesn't overly correlate with them. So it does
Yes.
give us unique information. Okay.
It does, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we can show you those correlation tables at some point. And, you know, yeah, that's actually a good lead into noise pollution. So noise pollution, it was something that has been recommended for us to look at. There wasn't a lot of data before, but we've Oliver found this really, really cool US Department of Transportation data. It's modeled data, but it's modeled based on the type of sound thing. So basically aviation, rail, and road. And you can basically look at the map and see it all. And I think the best way I can say this is like the red basically follows transportation routes for the most part. And we have those data already so well articulated with our different traffic indicators. So when we looked at the correlations for those, they were too high for noise pollution in of itself to be at all helpful. But Oliver noticed something that was really cool, and that is if you took everything else out but just kept airports, the noise pollution data for just airports does a really good spatial modeling of airports and the proximity toward them. And that's awesome because it helps us then articulate proximity toward that airport. And so now we have a pretty solid indicator of proximity to airports. So noise pollution, not useful. Proximity to airports via this noise pollution only for aircraft, totally useful. And this, when you just isolate aircrafts, and here, the proximity to airports part, the correlations are some, but not as high as before. again, so it's giving us some good explanation or different information in a potential DAC criteria. Any questions about this?
I have a question. Oh, we have a question here.
Yep.
So you said that when you were looking at all the transportation data, that it wasn't relevant because it correlated to the traffic.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm confused about sort of traffic and rail. How do the two of those compare? And is it because rail was picked up with some air quality indicator as opposed to noise?
Yeah, Emily, do you remember the correlations? Do I have it here? Yeah, here we go. So if we did the noise transportation modes for this, it did get some air quality stuff with benzene. So these are pretty high, and I don't want something this high added to our indicator list. So we've got traffic, benzene, land developed, PM 2.5, land use, and driving time. Those all kind of lined up with the full one.
Is there a way to look at rail separately in the way you're looking at airport locations separately?
Yeah, we could.
I mean, I raise it because I know a lot of disadvantaged communities have rail, right through them or, and, that is a major issue.
Yeah, okay. So we can look at rail alone, and then I think what we could call that is like just a spatial indicator for, proximity to rail lines, and keep it separate from airport. But yeah, we'll take a look at that. Any other thoughts or questions?
Not
So-
seeing any other hands up.
Okay. So mathematically, I still want us to be very wary of adding too many indicators at this point because we're starting to muddy the waters, and I have a whole slide for that. But mathematically speaking, airport proximity is an indicator that adds something without basically just being too correlated. So it's worthwhile looking at and investigating, especially because this had been requested, originally, and we just didn't have the data for it. So let's look at it now and look through and do some ground truthing to see how it feels to you. Okay. I want to go through pesticide use because pesticide use, there's a whole story behind things. There is a data set that we could use, and this came from, I believe, one of the feedback components where there was given some ideas. Abby, you had requested us looking into this from the last meeting we had. There is a Cornell kind of a pesticide sales and use reporting program that have these data. Because it's a use reporting program and it is an optional self-report, it is not going to be everything. And so I want us to really critically question whether that's a good thing or not. And then the other part of it is we'd have to get a little bit creative about trying to transfer the data that we have or that we could get because it's not at census tract level. So there's some computation there that, again, just to remind you, all of these things add just a little bit of error every time we start messing with them. So because it's self-report, that means that there could be some really big gaps in the data. And I worry about adding something that isn't consistent throughout the state. There's been discussion about lots of things not being consistent about this as far as the data points, but we've strived to kind of normalize everything, make sure that we have statewide data for everything. And we do. This one I think would be a little bit different. So if it's still something that you want us to look into, we can continue to look into it. I think if we do, we should look into a different data source and have this be something to track in the future. but I'd like to get your thoughts on that right
Thank you. I hesitate because of your hesitation, Alex, with the reliability of the data. And another thought is that in the North Country, we have a big issue with salt contamination in our water bodies. I think that's talked about a lot more than pesticide contamination.
now.
So as far as the North Country goes, it seems like we would be leaving something out if we included pesticides but didn't take into consideration salt as well.
Okay. That's really helpful. Abby?
So I agree that it would be premature to include this now if the data aren't good. But it does strike me as something important for the future, and actually strikes me as kind of crazy that this isn't well tracked. So if we can put in a vote for that if a good tracking mechanism doesn't exist, that it be created for this purpose, and inclusive of some of the things that were mentioned. Elizabeth mentioned golf courses. I wouldn't have thought of that, but I sure would be interested to know. So for the future, I think this is worth pursuing.
Okay. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay, well, I will note that I too think it's worth pursuing. I think there's so much more data and understanding now about forever chemicals and trying to understand how we deal with this. I think we put this into kind of a long-term monitoring. So every year when we're looking at the data and looking at things, we are taking steps to try to understand what's new here, what's the information here. And then, you all can help work with agencies to push them if it's possible to even track this. And we can try to look into some of that too. I don't know how easy or hard that would be, but we'll look into it. Okay, I'm going to move on. I'm assuming then that this will be moved into long-term tracking. If everyone can put a plus in the chat, taking advantage of this deliberation part right now. Cool. Okay.
Elizabeth DOL, my keyboard isn't working, but I'm adding a plus.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you all. That's really, really helpful. Okay, so now I couldn't meet with you all without going into some statsy thing, and I almost did a whole statsy thing. But one thing, with all the feedback and our desire to make this the best definition or set of criteria to identify disadvantaged communities, the impulse is almost always to add more to something to make it better. But that doesn't always work. And so, we've talked about this before, but we are getting to that tipping point to me that makes me feel as a statistician uncomfortable. So I want us to be thinking about not just, at this point, I think we can conceivably add, noise or airport and diabetes and still kind of start thinking about things. But at some point, we're going to have to kind of really, really think about, well, are these different measures, even the ones that we originally put in there, should we take some of those out? And we're going to have to do that through ground truthing, through kind of assessing how this is working, and also the purpose as far as this criteria being something to be focused within an EJ sense, not just trying to kind of identify the sociodemographic components, which I think are top of mind often, but something that can help spur kind of environmental and kind of ecological investment, clean energy investment in those DACs. So this is just me saying, have you ever cooked a meal where you kept adding spices and different ingredients, and then all of a sudden you're like, why did I do that? I can't taste anything now. We're going to closely get to that point at this point. So just want everyone to be aware of it.
Alex, I just want to interject very quickly. Elizabeth Pierre had to drop off, so we no longer have quorum. So we can continue with the presentation, and working group members can continue asking questions. But we'd like to ask folks to refrain from any deliberations at this point.
I'm glad we got a chance to get what we got. So let's review. I want to show you the different data parts here for the two different ones. So if we add diabetes in and noise pollution, we'd be at 47 indicators. Airport noise pollution would go into the potential pollution exposures. And then of course, diabetes would go in the health impacts and burdens. Okay, now we have 3 scenarios, and this is going to be crazy. But one thing I wanted to say is, you know, we wanted to show you that we refreshed the data, and the data do look pretty much the same once we've refreshed the data onto 2020 tracks, and also moved everything for 2020 tracks, but some things shifted. And so if you look at V1 on 2020 tracks, that's exactly what you voted on using the old data. V2 is now with all the refresh data. This doesn't include diabetes or airport proximity to airports, but there are some shifts. I want us to look at this visually and not freak out about the numbers because it's not going to be useful. So again, we've got 3 different scenarios here. The original one with the refresh data. We've got the second scenario, which is basically the original with refresh plus diabetes. And then we've got the third scenario, which is all the refresh stuff plus diabetes plus airport proximity. I'd hoped we could deliberate and basically start chipping away so that we could have a basic one and then start making some decisions, but we'll get there next time. I do want to show you these graphs though. I will say this, for the most part, things aren't shifting a lot. You'll see differences and you'll see some changes based on the refresh of the data, but you're not going to see huge shifts. And by the way, again, when you've kind of added that many spices to your thing, no one indicator is going to have that much shift at this point. So, y'all ready?
Can I ask a question before we go on?
Absolutely.
Based on, the feedback that we've gotten from communities, is there anything that we've learned that would tell us that any of the data points that we've put into the soup don't make sense?
So far, no. The feedback that we got this time, there were about, I think, 23 different feedback kind of entries. Nothing huge there. I do think it's worthwhile us really poking in and getting some information from communities and seeing whether this fits or not. And, and I think that that's something worthwhile for each of you to take back and ask your different kind of constituents that you're representing and seeing whether there's something to say, does this make sense? Does this not make sense? And if we get those data, we're able then to do more analysis, a more quantitative analysis on what has been useful and what hasn't, which indicators are the most indicative there. But without those data, we're really kind of taking a shot in the dark. There is no perfect measure that we're comparing to. It's a good question. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to show you the map. This is going to look, I think, crazier than it does because the colors are so bright. But in this case, the red are DAX and V1. The green are the things that stayed the same. And yellow are the additions or changes that are DAX now in V2. Now, V1, again, is the old data, and V2 is the Same inputs, just with refreshed data. Again, like it shows a lot of big things here, but visually it's not as big as you would think. So I'm gonna start, well, start up here.
Sorry, Alex, this is Abby. Quick question.
Yeah.
So is there any way by looking at this that we can see DACs that went away?
Yes, the DACs that went away are the red ones.
Okay. All right.
And the
Thank
DACs that got added are the yellow. The green is the same. And so this is just refresh data. And so it's, you know, I think also big tracks make it look so strong, but it's not necessarily true that way. So these were lost. Is there a place that you all want me to go?
Just that
Obviously-
top part of the state.
Okay, top part of the state. We could do
The
that.
whole top?
Okay,
New
so
York City.
the North Country, let's just start there, actually had some additions and only just, I think, 2 subtractions in this case. Let's look here. Yeah, there's 3 census tracts here that got lost. But the additions, again, I'm gonna zoom out. Didn't you miss this, guys? There's some additions here as well.
So it looks like the red one in Ogdensburg that you just zoomed in on, there's an airport in Ogdensburg, and it looks like there's the big red census tract, but then the city is in green. Can you, is that right?
Yeah, let me zoom in again. And so again, this doesn't have diabetes, nor does it have airport proximity. So we'll have to see what that looks like.
Okay. So this
Yeah.
is just the shift
Old
from
versus
2010 to 2020.
Yeah, with
okay.
new data, So
Okay.
tell you what, let's just skip from this and look at this updated refresh data with, words. And then we're comparing with diabetes. So I'm going to change this color if I can. Oh, bother. Ignore me. What did I do? Okay, I think we're back, kind of. So if we look here now, the little yellow, you guys are getting all my special words today. The like peachy color stayed the same DAC in both scenarios. And it looks like with diabetes, you don't get an addition. I think the ones where it gets dropped are probably in more urban areas. There are a couple little changes, but adding diabetes just on itself does not make huge changes. I'm going to zoom into New York City, and then we'll go to Buffalo.
Then if we could check out Long Island and the Mid-Hudson region after that, please. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so looks like the additions here are the darker orange. We've got a few kind of here and a couple losses. So there's some tipping points, but these are not wholesale. And as it's designed, frankly, there's no way that one indicator is gonna make a big tipping point.
Is the dark orange a loss or a gain?
It's a gain.
And blue is the loss?
And blue is the loss, yeah. Let's see, can I do it in here? We'll get the colors better and more crazy next time. Actually, I might be able to do it here. Let me see. Nope. Okay. So let's go looking now at, was it Long Island you wanted to see?
Yes, please.
Okay. Let's go back. Here's Long Island.
Just want to say on the New York City, it did kind of look like we lost Gowanus, which is interesting. So
Okay, well, let's go back there in a minute. It doesn't look like Long Island except for right here up at the Greenport West CDP got lost. Everything else was an addition. Okay, where am I zooming in for Gowanus? This?
So if you go to Brooklyn and you see Prospect Park, which is that sort of diamond-y shape.
Ah, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Evidently, you
looks like
can
Gowanus.
really go in there. Okay.
So yeah, near the coast, you see the blue, yeah, up
Here,
over.
this guy?
Oh, do you see I always do it by the Greenwood Cemetery and Prospect Park. If you see those, the little green areas up there, not green,
This guy
but
right
like
here.
greener. Yes, there.
Yeah.
So that, as far as I can tell, is Gowanus, which is like a super fun site, but also has a lot of gentrification. It's a weird area because there's a lot of development, but also still an active, super fun site. So it's just interesting that we lost it. And I'm sorry, so this is with just diabetes or?
This is just with diabetes.
Okay. Interesting.
And the census change or no?
Yes, everything from now on is the census chain and updated data.
So I would suspect it's the population change that drove that change, that difference.
Yeah, it could very well have been that. We can kind of actually check that in the other comparison if you want to see whether this got, although no matter what, it could have been a census change and then diabetes because this was updated data and then with diabetes. You know, sometimes the math, especially for these, I think when they flip like this and there's just a few of them, what happens is there are a lot of census tracts on the margins and this is where that one indicator can really make a difference is it pushes something one way or the other way in the calculation.
Yeah, and again, it's a weird place. There's like developments all over it. As someone who was in Brooklyn all my life, I don't know why you're building below sea level in a super fun site, but that's where money is. So it's interesting. And then I don't want to hog the time. Someone wanted to go to Buffalo next.
Well, I was going to go to Buffalo. Anyone else have any opinions where they want to go? Okay, we're going to Buffalo. So again, small changes, one here, loss, and one addition here.
Back to the capital region.
Okay. One addition. I can zoom out a little bit too.
Thought I saw blue in Troy.
Rochester too, please.
What, Abby? No, I wasn't going to show Rochester. Here we go. I also want us to spend some time in some of the places we may not know as well, but just so that we can compare things. Doesn't look like diabetes changes in Rochester.
And I just wanted to take a look at the Mid-Hudson.
Okay. Let's go to the Mid-Hudson next. Do you want me to zoom in anywhere?
Is that a loss near Newburgh?
Yeah, or is that just a hole near Newburgh?
Looks like the drop here and a drop here.
Is there a piece near Newburgh that got dropped?
I don't think that was a DAC at all ever. So
Okay.
that was just the green underline. And I think, you can add it here, like you can look at it. So the differences really are kind of, there were 25 tracks added across the whole state and 23 removed. New York City has the most number, but the net change across the different regions is negligible. But I say that only on a math, not a lived experience way. So again, with 46 indicators, you add this in, and again, it's, then averaged together, it's all added together in the health factor. That health factor then gets added together with all the other components or the other factors into the more person-oriented demographic component score, and then that gets added to the environmental one. So you can see how it's a tiny, to quote Amanda from years ago, it's like a tiny little hand shovel of change, as opposed to like the bigger changes if you changed a whole way of calculating a component score or something like that, or weighting a whole factor. I want to show you what adding airport proximity looks like. But I want to say that the next one we're going to see is the base layer, that S2 only, that S1, that S2 has diabetes in it when we're going to look at it now. What I wanted to do was to get to a point where we're deliberating and say, okay, guess what? We're cool with adding diabetes. Okay, next one. Let's look at then the next one to add. We made a crazy 3-way comparison one that we can look at, but it will do your head in as far as like trying to understand the different colors. We can look at it, just want you to know. Be prepared for your brain to hurt if we do. Okay, so now we've got the scenario where S2 is with diabetes. S3 is now with the addition of proximity to airports. And then that light peach is in both. This is all refresh data on 2020 census tracts. So I'm just going to start with the regions that have, multiple big airports. And let's see what it looks like. What this does is drops out some other areas, but it's going to add things closer to the major airports. So we're dropping things around here, and we're dropping some other areas here, but we're adding over here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more, and then. So there's more change here than there was with the addition of diabetes. And you can see it here with the added versus the removed and the net. New York City lost more tracks than it gained. Any thoughts here?
Alice, can you clarify? With the 2020, it went up 10%. Number of total tracks went up 10%, right? This is at that baseline.
That's at that baseline.
Okay, it's not so there are more overall tracks.
Yeah.
But we're talking about at that new baseline with the different scenarios, the change.
Yeah, and that is also reflected in the number of DACs. Are also, there's 10% more number of DACs when you look at the raw numbers when you compare it to the 2010 tracks. Still 35% overall, but 10% more individual count tracks.
Thank you.
Okay, so what we're seeing here is really there is a shift now that is bigger. Proximity to airports is something that is not correlated with other things as much. It is adding more and it has a bit more weight in its area, in its factor. So we're seeing this. I'm going to zoom out so we can look at Long Island a little bit more because there was some increases here. There's a loss here, but an increase here. And then we're getting up here. We're getting some losses.
Does the airport proximity take into account the size of the airport?
So the cool thing about airport proximity is that it is, because it's a noise pollution one, what it does is actually kind of like take the noise of it and it's modeled out. So the traffic, the way that the airplanes go and the launching and landing are also taken into account of it. So it has a pretty good surrounding area. It's not just saying, okay, here's a buffer around this. It's actually more nuanced than that.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is like, you know, is it comparing JFK to, you know, Islip Airport? Because they're completely different, you know, in terms of number of flights taking off.
Yeah, it does because it is modeled data. Let me try to go back up here and see. It's modeled data and it can give you kind of, do you see the color gradient change? And then I think that the way that we looked at this was to say, okay, if you're finding the census tracts that have a lot of that red component to it, then we put it basically as it's a proximity, it's high proximity. Let me see. This is another good one. This is the raw data, but you can start seeing the differences and see the level of red being bigger or smaller depending on the size of the airport, etc. So I think it does a pretty good job of capturing things. That's one of the things that makes me so happy about like Oliver's find here of using the noise pollution component of it, because it does give you a relative ability to see the size differences or magnitude. Okay, so this, by the way, is all raw modes, just because I think it's interesting for everyone to see how much, if you're looking at everything, not just airports, how much this like adds for the traffic components part and the rail. And this is what we then created for that if we wanted to use it. This is why I don't love it, because it's really following the highways. I do think it's a great idea to look into just rails. So let me go back and then we can start looking at different areas. And is there anything in the chat? I see like little things pop up, but they disappear before I can even read them.
Eddie said, Alex, did you mention earlier that one of the existing indicators largely captures the airport proximity tracks? If so, I'd be less inclined to include airport proximity if we're losing numerous NYC tracks.
Yeah, it doesn't. If we did the noise pollution, then it does highly correlate with other indicators. But if you take out the noise pollution and just look at the airport proximity, then it doesn't. So then it's adding something that's different. And I think when there is quorum, it's very much worth a discussion to see whether you want to add this or not. It changes things, whether it changes it, whether, say, Abby, if you look here and you think, does this really, this is now only from it gets dropped basically if you have proximity to airports, and then something here gets added. Is that indicative of DACness? which again is what we're trying to think through here.
That's why I brought up the Islip Airport on Long Island,
Mhm.
because that just seems off to me to consider that area a DAC.
I did wonder that too. Like, am I looking at the right place? Like there's a couple in Long Island that I was like, ah, that's interesting. You're only losing one, but you're getting some funky little ones. But again, I think those are where that's the slight tipping point.
This is Abby. I have a question that kind of goes back to Michael's question about, the addition of census tracts overall. And actually, starting with what I guess is maybe a dumb question. Does that mean that population overall has gone up about 10%?
I think so.
Okay.
Population and census tracts, census block groups, et cetera, are somewhat correlated. And that's why they split often, but it's not 100% correlation.
So would it be correct or incorrect or just can't be determined? Does that mean that that we could say that the need in New York State overall has also increased? And when I say need, I mean, need for people to have support in transitioning to clean energy, for example.
I would say no, because it's an arbitrary thing. So these boundaries were created, things got split because more people are there. I guess what you could say is like there's a 10% increase in the number of DACs, but that's artificial because we said 35% of all tracks for V1, and we say 35% for tracks in V2 here that we're looking at. And there was a 10% increase in census tracts overall, so there's going to be a 10% increase in the number of tracts that are designated DACs. One could say, if the population increased, that presumably if we looked at the population counts for 2010 versus 2020 that were designated DACs, it would likely be that there is more people now that are in DACs. But I think the proportion is about the same.
Okay. And I don't know that this is a question we would want to revisit, but I'm curious, probably more from the state agency staff, if that decision we made to cap it at 35% upon reflection, like how has that played out? Was that, yeah, are we meeting the need?
I think that's a really good question. I don't know whether agency staff have kind of the background information, or frankly, Abby, what at least me as a researcher would want to do is look longitudinally about the effectiveness of the investments, but then also looking at whether kind of there are still barriers that are outlining what's missed, what's not. But that's a long-term endeavor to try to understand.
I guess I could chime in on for state agencies. It's probably still a little bit early at this point to tell. We should be getting some reporting out in the next quarter, and we'll have a better idea of what that looks like in 2025.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions about this? When we meet and have a quorum, I want us to go through these again and make a decision about whether we include diabetes, and then make a decision about whether we include noise pollution. And we'll do some poking around for the rail lines as well. I don't know whether we'll have scenarios for that or not. But I also want us to go back now and to start thinking about something that has been brought up multiple times here, and also in the feedback that we just got, that the differences in DACs that are rural versus urban. And I know this is a little ridiculous, but just bear with me, because I think it's useful for us to, rather than looking at the data, when you think of a DAC in your respective area, what are the, like, not necessarily, they don't have to be like scientific indicators, but what indicates disadvantaged communities in a rural area? And I want us to write these down.
Alex, just quickly, after we go through this slide, I just kind of wanted to suggest that we maybe take a quick break, since we've been on for an hour and a half, if folks want to get up and stretch their legs after this. So after we finish this slide and this exercise, that we should take a break.
Yeah, actually, I think this is a nice time if before this. This is a good point. Let's stop here and then we can move forward.
All right, folks, we're gonna take a quick 10-minute break. If we could be back here by 3:42. Start it again, let everybody stretch their legs, use the facilities, and we'll see you in 10. Just waiting for Michael to get back and we'll get started again. No, we could probably just get started again.
Okie dokie. So kind of coming back to this, I'd really like to just get in our brains what we think of as a DAC, both in rural areas and urban areas. There's going to be a lot of overlap, but there are also, I'm anticipating, like maybe emphasis on different things. But I want us to think about that before we start looking at the numbers of stuff. So anyone want to start somewhere, rural, urban?
Jill, I can start.
Yeah.
Rural areas, I have low income, aging housing stock, proximity to mining and other industrial operations, high energy burden, lack of transit, and lack of services. I'll stop there.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Anyone want to add or go to the urban side?
What about water contamination on the rural side?
Okay, anything else on the rural side?
Can I, high energy burden and maybe specify that, you know, heating with oil and propane being more common, which is expensive, of course. And, what did we talk about earlier? Pesticides, exposure to pesticides.
Okay. Okay. Now for urban, thoughts describing? Thanks, Eddie.
Air pollution. Lack of services.
Population density.
Poverty. Or low income.
Yeah. High cost of living.
Not sure if this is what you're looking for, but just, what's the word? It's both like what we were talking about with Gowanus, like both talking about very vulnerable populations hitting up against very rich populations. So the dichotomy of that, I think is really prominent.
Gentrification, is that what you're?
Well, gentrification combined, like there are some very wealthy people, but then there are people who are not, and having a lot of the burdens associated right next to the people who may be feeling those burdens more or less. Which, yeah, gentrification is a piece of it.
Yeah, but definitely not all of it from, yeah.
High health burdens or poor health outcomes. Minimal green space.
I'm just going to add historical discrimination here. Lack of green space. Okay, I think this is good enough. I just wanted us to start thinking about how, like, and acknowledge the fact that we're using one set of criteria, and yet there are things that are more indicative of a DAC in rural areas, and there are things that are more indicative of a DAC in urban areas. And we see that in the data that we have. So we did this analysis where we looked at things, you know, basically like the average scores, percentile scores for urban tracts versus rural tracts, and we found a difference. So I want to show you in Excel because it's way easier to see there. I'm going to zoom into this. And what you're going to see here is these scores right here are the average percentile scores across the census tracts. So for each census tract, this is the average across all the census tracts of the scores, the percentile scores. So much, much higher scoring in urban areas as opposed to rural. And like the air pollution, developed land, traffic, a lot of these things are things that make sense in what we described as an urban tract versus a rural tract. The other part of this is that there's more things that explain or rank higher in urban versus rural. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's wrong, but it's something that is important to look at and acknowledge. There's some things that are pretty similar across lots of different places. But you do see some things that are different. So agricultural land use being the biggest one, driving time to healthcare, mobile homes, age, and inland flooding, industrial land use, remediation sites, scrap metal facilities, COPD, disabled population, heart attacks, RMP sites, and energy burden are all higher on the rural side than they are on the urban side. This is just data, so it's important for us to understand what this means. But it also means that there are some things here, well, I should say there's more indicators that show up in data and describe urban disadvantagedness. And some things that are pretty similar across both, and then some things that are more indicative of rural. Now, I want to be clear here that that doesn't necessarily mean that we're doing a bad job of capturing rural DACs given this quantitative method. It could be, but it may not be. So again, if you kind of look at what I showed you in Excel, these are all the indicators that are higher in urban areas, and these are all those in rural areas. One thing, when we looked at this list, the low income, aging house stock, proximity of mining, all those things are really important. But what we didn't talk about is the fact that when we look at rural tracts, they're huge and the population is much lower. So some things are not, if you percentile rank this, the score of, say, any kind of vulnerability indicator, it's going to be lower because it's just there's just less of it. There's less of a chance of having this kind of coalesced amount of quantitative data, and you see that. And so that's kind of a thing that we have to overcome. And how we've overcome that before, last time when we were deliberating and talking through this, was to have that regional scoring. So we again break down New York City and the rest of state, so that we make sure that even if you have lower scores in rural things, because it's rural and the numbers are just different there, that you have a chance to be scored on a basically like a different curve. And then the other part that we had discussed at length to overcome some of this is the fact that since sparse population can be such an issue, that individual criteria can help here. And focusing again on income can help to really allow for investment at an individual level.
I just had a question to your rural area point. Is any data suppressed for low numbers? Like if you can't model properly and there's only 5 people, does that happen in this data?
Yes. So there are 138 tracks. This is like, let's go way back over to here. If there are less, like, if there are not a lot of people, so like less than 100 people or something like that, I forget what it is because this is weird. It should be the other way, I think. Anyway, 138 tracks were only scored on their environmental indicators, not the population-based ones. And so that meant that we included 53 of those in as DACs. So there's definitely a group that has very low population, and we still wanted to look at it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So we can't deliberate about this, but I wanted to bring it to the fore because I think it's worthwhile thinking through the nuance of this. When we started this endeavor a couple of years ago, we acknowledged that there's no right or wrong answer with how we tackle DAC-ness, and that there are imperfections with everything, right? We're going for perfectly imperfect here. And yet, so we have to tackle these things with like clear eyes and understanding. So any questions about this or thoughts, things you want us to look through since we can't really deliberate about specifics?
It's Jill. I appreciate this conversation. And can you elaborate more? Can you go back one slide?
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk more about the regional scoring? I don't remember this conversation.
Well, you probably do. It's like easy to forget, right? So when we go to the scoring approach, this was ages ago that we all like kind of looked at this and we're like, hey, if you just do this statewide rank, New York City is getting a lot because there's just such a high population density, and it meant that it wasn't representing disadvantagedness across the state. And so one of the things that we did was say, okay, well, if we do a New York City rank and a rest of state rank, and then we basically slice up the pie so that there's a statewide rank, a New York City rank, and a rest of state rank, and we're taking the highest scores from each of those rankings and putting them into the DAC. And that meant that the rest of state was still going to be represented pretty well.
Okay.
It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing.
Thank you for the reminder. Another question, where's the line between rural and urban? Like, I thought there was a suburban in the middle there. Where's the line?
There is. I wanted to like dichotomize this a little bit so we can get into the specifics. I don't know. I don't have the definition with me. Emily might. But here for this kind of analysis, I wanted to really dichotomize it. So I think we might be missing the suburban tracks in this. That adds a whole nother layer of analysis and really doesn't speak to the essence of what I think a lot of the, oh, okay. Emily just said that we included suburban in rural so that we've got that there. Yep. again, the analysis is really, I think, I mean, it is okay. It is something that helps us understand where things are helping a score and for which region. And by the way, if we look at rural plus suburban, Emily just slacked me this, and urban, it splits the data, the census tracts, in 50-50 slots. So there's 50% of our census tracts are considered rural or suburban, and 50% are urban.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And I guess from this analysis, I'm not trying to say that we need more indicators that are rural, like speaking, because I don't think it's always that. The quality and the explanatory kind of ness of an indicator sometimes can matter way more than the number. What I want is for us to really be thinking critically about the reflection of what we have. Is it good enough to reflect both an urban DAC and a rural suburban DAC? And are we feeling ground truthing wise that this is true? And then also with a recognition that with this regional scoring, does that do kind of help to balance it? And then also that individual criteria, does that also help? Any more thoughts on this? Okay, well, is there anything just generally, I kind of want to think about thoughts about things in the future that we want to do? Like I want us to think through, we're not going to deliberate, but do you want us to, I'm going to change this slide, suggestions for us or the Loom team to look into? Anything that you want us to look into before the next time that we meet?
I just want to, sorry to cut in, to confirm from our council if we can have working group members send suggestions right now without quorum.
I think it would be better to wait until the next meeting. You know, I don't think we should include opinions, but I guess if people have questions as to if we've looked into anything in particular, maybe that would be a way of going about it. Have we explored blank?
Yeah, Lisa, that's kind of what I was thinking is, have we explored any, I don't know, another indicator you want us to look into or something like that? Would that be okay to ask for?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay. And then also any type of, Lisa, check me if I'm wrong, any type of analysis that you want to see for the next time, and any type of information like pre-read stuff that you would like for the next time. And we'll be putting some stuff together anyway, but anything you want to see that would help you make some decisions for the next meeting.
Yeah, I think that would be okay as long as folks aren't providing opinions, but you know, just seeing like different things that they're interested in looking into it, I think is okay.
Okay, cool.
It's
So,
Jill.
working group members. Yeah, Jill.
I think I would have an easier time answering this question if I was able to see the feedback.
Okay.
Can we, we're getting the feedback at the next meeting or prior to the next meeting?
I think we can send it out prior. I'd like for you all to be prepared before then. So I'll work with the agency folk to get that for you.
So maybe I could have some questions after seeing that.
Mm-hmm. And I will say, Jill, so we kind of go through it. Yeah, these were kind of the main things. Again, there were 23 different pieces of feedback. So a lot of them really fit through kind of this discussion about some methods components, inclusion or exclusion of race, land use, immigration, rural issues, low income communities, low population communities, those kinds of things. So we'll get you the specifics. The three things that I think were really important for us to look through and to really talk through was to go through the urban rural dichotomy, like making sure that there's accessibility to the maps, and then kind of the relevancy of the application of certain indicators and methods. So those were them, but getting you the specifics is very important, and we'll get that to you.
This is just a small thing, but I think based on the descriptions that we were fleshing out on the previous slide of rural and urban, I think it would just be interesting to make sure that that we have indicators that address all of those, that we're sure we have those.
Yeah, and I can tell you right now that we have más o menos these. Water contamination, I think we have, or we tried to have, but I'm not sure we have it. Exposure to pesticides, we discussed, not good enough yet. Here, population density is not something we have in there, but we do have it in essence by the census tract kind of component. It's not perfect. Cost of living we have by income and burden. This one I think is going to be something hard. We've got this, and we've got this.
And I'd be curious, the flip side of population density on urban areas, lack of population in the rural areas, and that has tremendous impact.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
and to be honest, the density and the lack of population, it would be hard to operationalize, but we can look into some of those different components. And I will say we're at the moment, and this is something that I want you to think about and we can discuss, but we're at the moment where like we're getting close to when we really need to be thinking about solidifying things and voting on them. So when we talk next, I also want us to like start making a plan, maybe like what we do now and what we do next. So next year or in the next 5 years or what have you, so that we're thinking through kind of the long-term components of this. To the end of not wanting to do a huge refresh every time because that changes stuff, and for the continuity of investments, it's good to keep things straight. Okay, so I'm going to add, Amy, look at list of urban, rural kind of slide. 69 and look at what's missing from that in criteria. Okay. Anything else? You had mentioned rail, kind of rail proximity based on noise pollution.
Noise and air, right? I mean, is air captured somewhere?
Air is definitely captured in benzene, PM 2.5, those different elements. Noise pollution is kind of the data source that we want to use to try to investigate this. Okay, anything else? Okay, so next steps for me and our team is to look at these. I want to also really have us next time go through those maps again and make some decisions on diabetes, proximity to airports, and anything else that we're looking at. And today we made some decisions when we had quorum on that we're going to move to the 2020 census tracks with the refresh data, and that we are not going to, what was the other one? Pesticides. We're not going to look to add the pesticide data that we currently have, but we will look for more stuff in the coming years to get a better measure. Those were the two things decided today. I'm going to stop sharing and hand this back to Alana.
Right. Okay, well, just to remind folks, our next meeting is going to be Tuesday, November 12th, from 2:30 to 5 o'clock. So just, remember that in order for us to continue this conversation and actually really get in and deliberate, and really dive into a lot of this, we really need to have quorum. That means we have to have at least 7 climate justice working group members, present in publicly accessible locations. And all members without qualifying disabilities have to be in person. So we really do need to make an effort to be in person. So thank you to everybody who was able to do that. I understand some folks were sick, and obviously that can't be helped. Nobody is blaming anybody for being ill, but we definitely need to try to make sure that we're in person. We also might need to consider what this looks like for deliberations and for voting, how many additional meetings we're going to need. As you know, the November 12th meeting is going to be our last meeting for 2024, so we need to consider what 2025 looks like. I'll be sending a poll around with some ideas, just looking for, generally, we have a good idea of what's good time-wise and day-wise, so I'll be sending out some suggestions for dates and asking folks to just send me dates in 2025, specifically in those early months that are not possible, that are just blackout dates, so that we can avoid that, because we really want to get this voted on and done before we are looking at first quarter in 2025. So before we close things out, are there any additional questions or comments people want to raise? All right, I'm not seeing any hands, so just.
I do have a question.
There you are.
Sorry,
Okay,
I
there
was
you are.
trying
That's
to make
okay.
space because I'm asking all the questions today.
That's fine.
Jill Hank. It might be easier to get quorum if we have a full working group. Has there been an update on the new members?
So we do have a new member that'll be joining us for the November 12th meeting. She was unable to join us this time around. She was out of town for work. I definitely want to let her introduce herself, but Amber Johnson from Energy Democracy New York will be joining us as a representative for rural communities. We still have a absence in the working group for that rural representative, and we're still vetting people and searching people out, and hopefully we'll have an update on that soon. But right now we are at 12. So yes, we definitely need to get to that full 13.
Thank you.
All right. Does anybody else have any questions, comments, or concerns before we close things out today? All right, well, thanks everyone for jumping on and for staying a little bit later than we usually do. Again, I will send out a reminder email with regards to our meeting on the 12th and make sure that we have all the information, including notes that you'll need to review. Hopefully we'll be able to vote on them, any data that we promised to provide you in this meeting. And as always, if you have any questions or concerns that you were unable to vocalize here or that just pop into your heads, please feel free to send those along to me. And that, also know that you can reach out to members of the technical team if you need any assistance or have any additional questions. All right, thanks everyone. We'll see you very soon. Bye, thank you.
Bye-bye.